There's actually this Joe Walsh quote from the Eagles, which I don't think Joe Walsh is known for his quotes, but it's in this documentary called The History of the Eagles, and he says this thing roundabout. It's when you're going through life, things seem completely random, and things are just happening, and this is bashing into that, and this is going this way, and this is going that way, and it looks just like unorganized chaos. But then when you look back at it, it looks like a finely crafted novel. Like everything just leads naturally into the other one. And I can honestly say, yeah, that's what it looks like looking back. But at the time, not at all. It was a terrible situation. I didn't know what I was going to do. And again, this is a career that I was chasing for 4 years. I finally got it. So I spent 5 years baseballing, essentially.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Accidental Badass Podcast. I'm your host, Erin Hallstrom. Who you just heard there was Mark Saratori, a friend and fellow badass, talking about the giant leap he took searching for his dream job, and then deciding to leave it once he realized it wasn't a dream after all. Listen in as we talk during this episode about baseball, marketing, and the kind of bravery it takes to recognize that life really does begin outside of your comfort zone. We also discuss the symphony of chaos that accompanies major life shifts, as well as the kinds of lessons learned along the way. For recent graduates, or for those contemplating a career in marketing, be sure to listen through to the end as we talk about skill stacking and why it's important to your career, no matter what route you take. Enjoy the episode, and be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
Hey, welcome to the Accidental Badass Podcast. How are you doing now?
Thank you. I am ecstatic to be here.
Well, I appreciate it. And, this is what we do during COVID. We record, we get all our, great conversations, rallying the troops, finding my fellow badasses, and sitting down and talking with them. And I am excited about what we're going to talk about tonight. We are talking about chasing a dream, and then, oh crap, what happens? I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. It's something related to a career and a job choice. So before we get to all of that, can you tell me, what is it that you do for a living right now?
Right now, I am a communications specialist, is my official title, at a local municipality. So I work for the local government of the city in which you live, wherever that may be. And you may be surprised to learn that there is a marketing department at such an institution, but some of them have them. And basically, I manage the social media accounts, write press releases, write copy for the website and other brochures, assist in making videos, anything that kind of promotes the village and the message they're trying to put out.
So in a way, you're kind of like Leslie Knope, Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec, but if they didn't work in the Parks Department. Kind of. Maybe.
It's
not
very
really.
close.
Okay.
Having rewatched Parks and Rec, it can get pretty close to real life sometimes.
I don't know for anyone listening if they're familiar with that show, but if they are, maybe that gives it context. So, okay. You do communications for a municipality, but I know that's not where you started. So why don't we back up a little bit, and can you tell me about your background? Like, what did you go to college for, your major? Was there anything that compelled you to want to follow that path when you went into school?
I went to Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois, and I started out wanting to make movies. So I went to Lewis because they had a great broadcasting program, and I started out on the TV side and actually had radio courses my first semester and quickly fell in love with that and shifted more to the radio side of things. But it was still all broadcasting sorts of courses and learning, had my own radio show for the 3.5 years I was there. And then my last semester of my senior year, I got an internship with 97.1 The Drive, a radio station downtown Chicago, which also happened to be my favorite radio station. So it was a pretty exciting time in college to be broadcasting and doing those sorts of things, and then to actually land an internship at your favorite station to kind of finish off your college career.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know between my junior and senior years in college, I was the communications intern for Great America, Six Flags theme park, and that even 20 plus some odd years later still stands as my favorite internship ever. So I totally appreciate that. Getting to intern at your favorite thing, something that you're passionate about. So was radio and broadcast, is that something that, like, you had said you wanted to do movies, but I mean, in addition to, liking the Drive radio station from a young age, was it movies? You just liked how they were made and this seemed to be a path?
I think what happened was, from a young age, your parents have a video camera. You've got cameras all over the place, especially nowadays, but not necessarily when I was young. But we had a video camera, and there's actually an episode of the Brady Bunch that inspired me to first pick it up. The kids start making home videos, and that's what I did, and just kind of rolled with it. And so I took that through middle school and through high school and did stop motion animation, and basically it was the medium that was available to me. I never really had radio as an option until I got to college, and then everything was right there. And radio was just, maybe because it was the newer thing for me and it was more exciting, but it was also easier. There wasn't a lot of post-production on the back end like there is with video. It was much more spontaneous. It was easier to be accessible. You bring a friend in, and they know how to talk into a microphone. There's no acting there. They just talk about what they like to do. You get to play music. You get to do all sorts of goofy things. And that's kind of when I made the switch. And I think it was just because I didn't have access to radio when I was growing up, whereas I had a camera during that time.
So being on a podcast just feels like, old hat to you. You're used to being on the waves, just talking into a microphone. This is great.
Yep, bringing back the old memories. I'm just lacking my giant headphones right now. But everything else, yeah totally just like it.
Yep. You finished college at Lewis University, and then what happened?
Like I told you, I had an internship at the Drive, and I was in promotions, so I'm the guy that's working the tent, with that run that starts at 6 a.m. I'm there handing out T-shirts and bagels, spin the wheel for the prize, whatever. And it was just a fantastic place to work. And I have worked, jumping ahead a little bit, I have had 9 jobs in my professional career, and working at the Drive was the best office I have ever had. The people, the atmosphere, I peaked ridiculously early. And I didn't want to leave that sort of environment. So as I was approaching graduation, I kind of poked around and saw that there was a sales position open. And a lot of the sales guys who worked there said, "Oh, Mark, you'll be great at this. You're smart. This is an easy job. You should totally apply." So I did, and I got it. And now I started my first day of work in January of 2011 on my 22nd birthday. Happy birthday, Mark. You're off to the office to start your professional career. But pretty shortly after, I realized I was not a salesperson. There's a specific type of person, outgoing, real confident with what they're selling, maybe even a bit pushy, and I just was not that person at all. And I figured out this isn't right. And even though I loved the place, the job, saying that I worked at the Drive and all of that, my favorite kind of music, it wasn't right. And so I started looking and come into, a hard decision of, well, what do you do now? And one thing I learned about professional radio, whereas in college you can do a little bit of everything. You have your radio show. I was the station general manager. If I want to make a produced commercial or something goofy, well, I can go do that. But in the professional world, you don't walk around and do all that sort of thing. Everyone has their job. And I was a sales guy, and you're not going to walk into the on-air studio in Chicago. That doesn't happen that way. I wasn't going to be able to pick all the music. Someone else does that. I wasn't a production guy. Someone else does that. So the doors were kind of closed to me in radio, and I needed to figure out what to do. So what I did was determine, well, what did I actually like about the sales job? And thinking about it, it was when I would come up with the ideas to pitch the clients. That year that I was in sales, the Star Wars Blu-rays came out, and I had this delusion that I could get Lucasfilm as a client, and they would spend money with me to advertise the Star Wars Blu-rays on the drive. And I came up with all these great Star Wars ideas, being a big Star Wars fan myself. Came up with all these ideas I was going to pitch to them. And I just remember thinking, man, that was so fun putting together those ideas. What is that? And I kind of determined that, well, I guess this is marketing. So that's what I want to look at. And I also loved baseball, so I said, well, there's marketing in baseball. Let's try to put those things together. And that's kind of when that first inkling was born of, hey, I want to get into baseball.
So I'm getting caught up. Sales job. Also, when you were explaining the thing about the marketing and the ideas, I'm the same exact way. I was picking up what you were putting down, because everything you said, that's me too. Like, I'm the one who concocts all these, I don't want to say wild, but wild ideas, and love to take them from conception or, ideation to conception to like, oh my gosh, here it is. So I love that. I can totally understand that. The love of baseball, I don't have it as strongly as you do. But let's move now to, okay, you figured out marketing, and I know that you love baseball, but how did these two where did the marriage of marketing and baseball occur?
If you think of minor league baseball, you're probably thinking of wild and crazy theme nights, quarter beer nights, Star Wars Day, weird bobbleheads. Like, minor league baseball is fueled by crazy marketing gimmicks to get people through the gates. And this is what I kind of wanted to do, is work in baseball and be the one that comes up with those crazy, wacky things. So what I did is, in November of 2011, before I left the drive, I started applying to some of the local teams, Cubs, Sox, Brewers, some of the local minor league teams as well, probably about 6 or 7. I wrote them all letters and resumes and mailed it out, signed it, and nothing happened. So I left the drive in January of 2012 rather, and luckily one of my coworkers had a contact at a media buying agency that knew they were looking for some help. So I caught on over there, another job downtown, got to ride the train now instead of driving, which was great, and I worked for a year there. One thing to understand about baseball, and I'm sure this is true of all sports, is unlike other jobs, the hiring window for baseball is just the off season. You've got probably October to maybe February, more realistically January, to get a job and get in the door, because then the planning for the season starts and the season goes, and it's very rare that people will quit their jobs mid-season. So if you don't get it in that window, you got to wait a whole nother turn of the calendar before that opens up again. So I worked my baseball season of 2012 with the media buying agency, and then I tried again. But this time I widened the net a little bit, and I said, okay, all right, even though I've never lived anywhere outside of the Chicagoland area, college included, I will move anywhere to get a Major League Baseball job. And then I'll also include the couple local minor league teams as well, just in case. So those letters and resumes went out to about 34 teams. And once again, nothing happened. So worked another year at the media buying agency. So what am I going to do now? Well, okay, all hands on deck. Every baseball team that's professional, I'm applying to. I sent nearly 200 letters. I signed every one of those letters. I wrote out the addresses on the envelopes. They were on fancy stationery. I even got baseball team stamps. Like, we're going all out here. And I sent it out. And I started to get some calls. But unfortunately, they didn't have job offers associated with them. They were more people going, hey, Mark, we got your letter. We don't have anything. But I just wanted to say, keep it up. It's a tough field to get into. You don't have any sports on your resume, which is one of the things I heard. And I thought I had a pretty solid resume because I had worked at the radio station in college and professionally. I had 2 years at a media buying agency. Like, I'm not just some kid out of college with nothing. But what they said is you don't have any sports, and you just need any sports. Sports kind of translates. So whether it's you're working in soccer, you're working in football, like that works for baseball. It's all interchangeable. And I kind of digested that and said, okay, well, that's some good advice. But I appreciated them calling. I mean, I even got a call from a guy that worked higher up at the Mets. This is an MLB team who's calling me just to offer some advice. So that was nice, but I would have preferred some job offers, someone calling with some jobs. And eventually I got 8 calls that did have jobs associated with them. Now, doing some quick math here, I sent out almost 200 letters, and I got 8 calls. That's about a 4% response rate. So is it any wonder why my initial run of 6 or 7 teams really didn't garner anything?
Yeah.
Looking back, it's like, man, that was so naive to think you could have just waltzed right into the Sox, Cubs, or Brewers and just been like, oh, yeah, here I am. But of those 8 calls, I got one job offer. It was for an unpaid internship in South Florida for a team called the Charlotte Stone Crabs. Now, as I received that offer, I was still in talks with an internship that was paid with a major league team, the Tampa Bay Rays. And the Stone Crabs needed to know by X date whether I was going to take the job or not. And when I told the Rays that, hey, when is your process going to be done? And they said, it's going to take us well into the new year. Well, now I had a decision to make. Do I take the job, the unpaid internship, and know that I'm going to work in baseball this year? Or do I roll the dice and try to get on with a major league team for a paid internship? And I'm not much of a gambler in the first place, so the thought of going for the bigger team and then losing and then have to work another year at the ad agency was just too much for me to handle. I would not be able to sit there knowing that you could have been working in baseball right now, but you got greedy. So I took the unpaid internship, started the second week of January, and I left my full-time job with benefits, living at home in the only city, the only metropolitan area I've ever lived in, and I moved down to South Florida, in between Fort Myers and Sarasota, to go work an unpaid internship for the Charlotte Stone Crabs. And that was the start of it.
That was very badass and risky. I'm trying to think. How old were you at the time?
Let's see. So probably like 24, I think.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Okay. All right. That's, making me sweat just a little bit thinking about that now. So, okay. So you moved down to South Florida.
So I moved down to South Florida, and one of the things that I quickly learned is that in minor league baseball, even though I was the marketing intern, which officially meant social media, website, videos, in minor league baseball, especially when you're at the lower levels where the staffs aren't as big, you do whatever is required. And one of my first duties was to put on the mascot suit and dance around and entertain the people in line who were there to buy season tickets that morning. So it was a pretty quick introduction to minor league baseball, is being the mascot almost day one. The great thing about being able to do all sorts of other things, though, is I also got to put together theme nights. I'm, as I said, big Star Wars guy, and so I said, hey, can I organize a Star Wars night? They're like, yeah, sure, absolutely. So I got to pick out the music and do the graphics and come up with the games and contact the costume guys of the 501st to come out, and then we had stormtroopers and Chewbacca walking around the concourse because I did it. You know, that was a pretty awesome thing to say. But then there were also some not so great things that come with that, which is being a mascot and midday in July in Florida in 95-degree heat and 100% humidity, dancing around with, you know, a carpet on your head. There was picking up fireworks afterwards, picking up the debris after the fireworks show. You got to pull the tarp when you work in the minors. And that's when the storm's coming, and then after it goes, you got to pull and you do that. I had to do things like drive players to the airport, sometimes at 3 a.m., so they could catch their flight. But it was all part of the job, and I was thrilled to be there and doing it because I'm here. I'm not getting paid, but I'm here working in baseball, and it was pretty great. But most of these positions in minor league baseball, especially internships, are seasonal. So at the end of the season in September, there was no job for me. So I moved back home to the Chicago area and started the process again, making phone calls, sending out applications to find that next job for 2015.
Okay. Did you meet any players that would go on to be in the major leagues?
There were some players on our team that did end up playing in the majors. The biggest of them would probably be, well, I should mention this was a Tampa Bay Rays affiliate. It is Advanced A-ball, which basically means they have to climb up 3 more rungs to get into the major leagues. It's Advanced A, Double A, Triple A, the majors. So there's still a pretty good ways to go. But the biggest of them was probably Rays pitcher Blake Snell. He actually threw a no-hitter while we were down there, and it was notable because it was a rain-shortened no-hitter, and they just didn't stop the game. And as I told you, we had to pull tarp, so we're all sitting there waiting to pull the tarp, and they're not stopping the game, and it just starts pouring buckets, the biggest raindrops I've ever experienced in my whole life.
Gosh.
And they're not calling it. Finally, they stop it, and we pulled the tarp out. By then, it was too late. We couldn't get the tarp on because the grass was sucking it down, the rainwater on top of the tarp. Infield was like quicksand. But that was a Blake Snell no-hitter. So right now he's the Rays ace. He won the Cy Young Award a couple years ago. So he would probably be the biggest name that came out of that team.
Nice. Yeah, my brother did a similar kind of gig that you did here locally, and he likes to tell the story of he remembers Kyle Schwarber, which I know, you know, he's a Cub, but not your favorite team. But, yeah, that my brother knew Kyle Schwarber when. So I always like anybody hearing the stories of, you know, you knew a player when before they were, you know, in the majors. So, okay.
Absolutely.
So you are back home.
That's
2015.
That's something that the minors can provide you is, you know, I knew the player back when, and funnily enough, that no-hitter Kyle Schwarber was on the team for. He was.
Oh, really?
They were playing the Daytona Cubs, and he had just been drafted. And I don't think he played, but he was on the team. So we got the Schwarber connection going. Your brother and I.
The 6 degrees of Kyle Schwarber. I feel like that should be a game. Okay. 2015. You're back home, back in the Chicago area, and looking for the next high, so to speak. So the next sports marketing gig. So what happened then?
Correct. So this time I stopped doing the letters and was doing more looking for specific jobs. And I sent out about 30 or so applications that time around and ended up getting 8 calls. I got very close to landing a full-time job with the Oakland Athletics, which would have been phenomenal. For a year previously, I couldn't even get a paid internship, and now I could get a full-time job with a major league team. I ended up finishing top 5 out of 700. They said that I should be very proud of that. I would have been more proud if I would have finished number 1, but it was pretty awesome to be that close to that position, and it kind of kept me going. Where if I was that close to that, like, I can't be far away. Like, I've got what it takes. So I also almost got a position, a full-time job with an independent team out in Pennsylvania. I was second out of 110, they told me. So one thing that you'll kind of notice are those numbers: 700 people for Oakland, 110 people for Pennsylvania. Sports is very, very competitive, and it's very hard to get in because everyone wants to get in. So that makes it very hard, and when you have a job, you want to hang on to it, and it can be a bit of a scramble. So I'm getting real close, but I'm not getting that job. So it's mid-February. I don't have anything yet. It's getting pretty late. As I told you, this is kind of the end of the line, February, and if you don't have anything, you got to wait for another calendar year. So I don't know what I'm going to do, and I have to start thinking about, if I don't get this job, this next gig, what am I going to do for a year? And that was a little scary to think about, and I didn't want to think about it. Fortunately, a team did come through at the 11th hour with a paid internship this time to go out to Omaha, Nebraska, work AAA, which is the highest level of the minors, and I started that on February 23rd, so late February, almost the end of the month.
February in Nebraska.
February in Nebraska, that's right. It was chilly. And this was a little less marketing and more multimedia. So I was going to be operating a camera during the game days. Eventually, I would be directing the baseball games on a 5-camera system. I worked the scoreboard. So this was kind of almost more a return to what I studied in college. And I was prepared for it because I knew all these things. And it was a lot of fun. One big difference I learned that with a larger organization, I never had to be the mascot. I didn't really have to pull tarp unless it was not during a game. They had their own kind of grounds crew for game day stuff. So it was a little bit different. But one thing that was the same was that at the end of the year, I didn't have a job again. So I had to go back home again and get back on the horse and continue looking for now what I needed to be the full-time job. So I sent out about 10 applications. I got 3 callbacks, and this time I actually got 2 offers. I got to pick what I was going to do, which was definitely a departure from what was going on last time. And you want to talk about, now this is going into year 3. Now I've got some connections and some familiarity. I ended up taking the job, that independent league team in Pennsylvania. The person that got hired last time only lasted a season. I came in second. They knew who I was. I applied again. I still had the guy's email. We connected, and I ended up getting that position. And I flew out to York, Pennsylvania in mid-November. So the earliest by far that I had started a baseball job. And after 4 years of trying to get here to this spot, I finally had my full-time benefits job in baseball, in marketing.
Okay. So you were legitimately living the dream, your dream, living your dream. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone asked me, I could say that, and it would be true. Unlike most people who say that, not so much true. This was fact. I was living that dream that I had of working in baseball. And things were great. I vividly remember watching this movie on Netflix. It's called Hector and the Search for Happiness, and it's a Simon Pegg movie. And it's kind of about that similar thing of living life, doing what you want to do, blah, blah, blah. And I got like insanely happy, and I had this like Shia LaBeouf moment, you know, like the just do it, yeah, sort of thing. And it spawned this infamous Facebook post that every time it comes up on the history, I'm like, oh yeah, it was that night. So I was ecstatic. I was really, really happy. And then things didn't go so well. Cracks started to show. And I think there was a lot of contributing factors. I told you I moved out there mid-November, and that's holiday time. That's Thanksgiving, that's Christmas, that's New Year's. My birthday is January 3rd. So that's 4 major holidays right there that I was still so new, so I didn't have like any close friends or anything in the Pennsylvania area in York. Obviously, I had no family out in that area either, so I spent all those things alone. And I thought it wouldn't affect me because when you work in baseball, what a lot of people probably don't realize about sports is that you're working like 70 to 80 hours a week because you have normal office hours, 9 to 5, but then you work the games after that. And sometimes the games go till like 10 o'clock. And if you got to pick up fireworks that night, well, now you're there to 11, maybe midnight. And, oh, the team is in town this weekend. Well, guess what? You're working the weekend too. So you can easily string together 7, 10 days straight of working. And I was okay with that previously, and I kind of just went on the method of, well, I'm working so much that I'm not going to miss friends or anything like that because I'm just working. And it worked for a while until it didn't. So I think the holidays bothered me a little bit. You know, you're constantly working, so you can't make any friends. And York was in a fantastic place. You know, I was 45 minutes away from Baltimore, an hour 15 by train from D.C., 3 hours drive from New York, 2 from Philadelphia. Like, there was so much to see and do and whatnot, but when I would get a day off, you're just exhausted, and you just want to stay in the apartment and not do anything. Then there was the money situation. You know, this was my full-time job that I've been waiting for, and when they gave me the salary, they're like, this is actually pretty good for your first full-time baseball salary. Aaron, it was $27,000.
Oh.
And that's about $1,400 a month. My rent was $800. That left about $600 for groceries, internet, gas, power, and everything else. So, you know, I'm seeing my friends on Facebook getting married, having kids, buying houses, and I can't even afford name brand cereal. You know, it was, I think all of that just kind of came together, and there were also frictions at work almost every day, and it became a very bad situation. I'm pretty sure I was depressed, and I'm just like, you know what, I gotta get out. And it was just this realization of, I spent all this time and all this drive, and this was my singular goal to get here, and now I need to get out of here.
I think a lot of people so often spend their careers like trying to grab a hold, like it's, you know, that dragon that they'll never catch. You know, I'd love to have this job, that's my dream and whatnot, and they never really achieve it. Whereas, you know, they spend their whole careers working toward it, only to then retire and, you know, what have you after that. But you found it, you know, a lot of hard work, a lot of hard hours, and you got it. You lived this dream job, and it suddenly, you know, this realization like, oh my gosh, my dream job it sounds like almost not really turning into a nightmare, but it's like, oh my gosh, my dream job wasn't exactly the dream I thought it was. Would you say that's accurate, or?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say, especially at that time, yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. it was an agonizing time. And just to give you an idea of how bad it was, opening day was towards the end of April in this particular league, and I started applying to places in May, so roughly 2 weeks after opening day. So I was definitely needing to get out of there, and I submitted over the course of 9 months, which is how long it took me to find a job. I submitted 105 applications, and I moved back home in early August without a job because I just needed to get out of there. And I did the cardinal sin of what I told you people don't do, which is quit during the season. It just, I knew that I know this is terrible for the team. I'm putting them in a lurch, but I just need to get out of here because things are just that bad for me right now. And I moved back home and kept applying for stuff, and I didn't know what to do. I mean, I applied to colleges, hospitals, restaurant chains. I was applying to jobs in multiple states. It was all over the board. Anything that had the right kind of marketing in it, I was applying to. And I was pretty lost, and it was very scary. I had to confront those things that I kind of stuffed away in a shoebox when Omaha came through that one off season where I wasn't finding a baseball job. Well, what do I do? And I didn't have to think about it. Well, now I have to think about it. What do you do? And what actually ended up happening was my brother called me and said, hey, I've got this counselor at school. She's kind of a career counselor, and I was telling her about what you were going through, and she said for you to give her a call, and maybe she can help. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll give her a call. And he was doing his graduate degree at Oregon. So I'm in Pennsylvania trying to figure out times to call someone in Oregon. So that was fun, trying to figure out the time changes that worked for both of us. But she told me, she says, have you ever considered government? I'm like, I'm not running for office. She's like, no. Like every state, most locals, counties, townships, like they have marketing people. I'm like, oh, I never really thought about that. And she said, yeah, I worked at a police department for a very long time, and it's a very stable job, and, you should look into that. So I kind of added government sort of things into my mix of job applications. And over those 105 applications, I got 5 calls. 5. Wow. And 3 of those were government positions. And one of those 3 ended up being the job I actually took, which was a part-time marketing job. So the government is what saved me. And I'm still at that job today, which later became, a year afterwards, became full-time. And if it's, I don't know, I guess it's because of that counselor in Oregon that pointed me into the role of government, and that's where I'm at now.
Talk about, almost, I don't know, I want to say divine intervention, but talk about, your brother, everything was, perfectly aligned, right place, right time, in terms of your brother was talking to the counselor, who then had the availability to be able to talk to you, who, just all of these things lined up. And I'm sure it did not feel that way at the time. Now in hindsight, it's yep, it worked out. Look at that. It all worked out. But I imagine at the time it didn't feel like that.
No, not at all. And there's actually this Joe Walsh quote from the Eagles, which I don't think Joe Walsh is known for his quotes, but it's in this documentary called The History of the Eagles, and he says this thing roundabout. It's when you're going through life, things seem completely random, and things are just happening, and this is bashing into that, and this is going this way, and this is going that way, and it looks just like unorganized chaos. But then when you look back at it, it looks like a finely crafted novel. Like everything just leads naturally into the other one. And I can honestly say, yeah, that's what it looks like looking back. But at the time, not at all. It was a terrible situation. I didn't know what I was going to do. And again, this is a career that I was chasing for 4 years. I finally got it. So I spent 5 years baseballing, essentially. And now it's like, you got to stop.
Yeah. I've not heard this Joe Walsh quote, but I'm going to hunt it down and find that quote, because when you said that, I got chills, because that is so spot on. I know in my own life, similarly, like if at the time it felt like the most agonizing things I was going through and that they seemed so random. And yeah, you look back, it's like, nope, everything happened the way it was supposed to happen to uncover X, Y, and Z that then opened the door to, ABC. So yeah, I'm going to check that quote out for sure. Thank you for telling me about it, opening my eyes to that. So
sure.
You've done all of this, and the seeming randomness actually now has all led you to where you're at now. So it begs the question, would you do any of this all over again? Or would you do the whole thing all over again?
As bad as it turned out, as financially crippling as it was for those 3 years, I think I would, because I learned so much. I learned skills that still help me to this day. I learned wacky promotions and outside-the-box thinking, and some of that wackiness plays out now in the videos that I make for my current job or the ideas that I have. It taught me staying late is not that big of a deal, especially when you come from working 12-hour days, sometimes multiple days in a row, and now you're working an 8-hour day and they ask if you can stay for another 20 minutes or another hour. It's like, yeah, of course I can. Like, this is nothing. I learned about living in other places. Like I told you, I had never been outside the Chicagoland area. I've never lived outside. Well, I've been outside of it, but never lived there. And the year I moved down, I left Chicago during the first polar vortex. I was walking a mile to work when the clock on one of the buildings on Wacker Drive said negative 12 degrees, which of course doesn't factor in for wind chill. And 2 days later, I'm in South Florida driving with the windows down. It was a mind-blowing experience, because I go, oh, I get it now. I understand why people live here. Of course, when we got into summer, I learned to absolutely hate Florida, because it's like Groundhog Day down there. It's 95 degrees with an afternoon thunderstorm almost every day. But it opened me up to living to other places. I lived in Florida. I lived on the East Coast in Pennsylvania. I lived in the heart of the Midwest in Omaha, Nebraska, in the Plains. They were all very different from one another, different people, different price points, different weather. And that really expanded my mind in that sense. And there's so many people that will complain about, oh, I hate the winters in Chicago. But when you say, well, then why don't you move? They've got a million excuses. And I think maybe it's just because they've never tried it. So they're almost a little afraid of it. But that was a huge thing for me. But I think the biggest thing, besides the incredible stories that I have from those 3 years and all that stuff, was just, this could have been one of those lifelong regrets, where flash back to the media buying agency, and I have this unpaid internship sitting in front of me, but I go, it's an unpaid internship. I don't want to go down to Florida. It's so far away. I won't be making any money. I'm a little nervous about that. I'm just going to look for something closer to home. And if I never do that, I'd probably always be thinking, what if I would have taken that job? What if I would have been working in baseball? Where would I be right now? But I took that path, and I have the answer to that. And it didn't turn out great, but I got a lot from it. And so I would absolutely do it again.
It reminds me of, I forget who said it the first time, but it's been repeated so many other times since, but life begins outside of your comfort zone, that the second you set foot outside of, this is what I'm used to, and gosh, this is going to mentally hurt, or it's going to be uncomfortable for me to do this. It's like that is where you grow, and that is where everything happens, when you find the courage and the badass skill to step outside of what you're comfortable with and really learn to live, learn to take on that, that job that, shoot, I don't want to live without, I don't want to live with regret. I'm going to go grab that thing and try it, even if I'm uncomfortable doing it in a place that I don't know anybody. So I like that. I think that is so important for everyone. So what advice would you give to people who are teetering on that, I'm not sure, there's this potential job that I've always thought about. Should I take it? So that's the first part. And then the second part of the question would be, to your current marketing majors, just graduated, contemplating a marketing major degree in school, what advice would you give those people? So let me know if I need to repeat both of those.
Nope, I think I got it.
All right.
For the person that has the possibility of that job, I think the first thing you have to do is look at your situation. If you're married, you've got kids and mortgage, there's probably going to be some limitations. I was still fairly young, was living at home, so I didn't have any mortgage, any overhead costs. I had some savings built up from working professionally for about 3 years. I could afford to do that. I was free and unattached. So if that's the situation you're in and the only thing holding you back is fear, then you got to do it, especially if this is something like myself that you always wanted to do. Because, again, if you don't, this could be something that holds over your life forever of, what if? What if I took that job? You got to do it. You don't want to ruin yourself, though. So, again, if you don't have enough savings to make this work, if you got to live somewhere very expensive, it's not worth chasing the possibility of a dream. As we've learned, that just because you think it's your dream, it might not actually be that. It's not ruining your entire life for that. It's got to make sense. But if it's just fear, you got to do it. For the people that are just graduating with a degree, the biggest thing I would say is do something called skill stacking. Sure, you've got a degree in marketing, but how are you with video? Do you know how social media works? Can you take pictures? These are all things that jobs are looking for. That sure, it might be a marketing position, but hey, if you know how to actually write a video, write a script, if you know how to shoot things, shoot angles, shoot photographs, these are going to be valuable. The more things you know, the more things you can bring to the table, the better of odds that you're going to get the job, but then also that you're going to be productive and do well in that job. People are looking for more than just the bare minimum. Sure, you can get by on that, but if you can do more, that's going to be better. So always be learning, and now with YouTube and the internet and all this sort of stuff, it's so easy to pick up new skills. I would highly recommend that. And I guess overall, I would also say to the people that maybe, like myself, they love baseball, but they don't want to leave their full-time job, and they don't want to go full tilt. I still keep my toe in the water. You can go to a local minor league team, and you can be something called a game day employee. That's the ushers, the ticket takers. You can work in the concession stand. I did video work for one of the local teams here, the Joliet Slammers. I worked up there directing like I did back in Omaha. And I ended up being part of the team when they won the championship. And now I have a championship ring, something that eluded me for 3 years. I got. and kind of capped off my baseball career there. But you can keep a toe in the water. Even with the internet, I work with a baseball team in Australia, doing social media and graphics work for them. And it's so much fun. And that's just because of the internet. I can work digitally. I can still be involved in baseball without it being my primary job. And I think there's a lot of those types of things available that you can still be involved in it in some way and get your fun out of it without it having to consume your life.
I think that's so important. I did not know about the game day employee. That's really cool. Everyone take note, especially sports fans out there. No, I agree. So we were talking before we started recording on how I had done 2 other podcast recordings for my work podcast, and they were both about job skills. They were both within, the Fortune 500 companies and the different levels within them, but job training, skills gaps, stuff like that. And this is the third recording, the third time I've talked to someone and talking about just that almost a cross-pollination of skills. And I can't help but think, this podcast for me is actually one of those examples of, I've been in my career for 20 years, and, I'm in media and publishing and a version of marketing similar but not quite to yours. And even learning podcasts and how to podcast was just part of the evolution of my career. And, I'm constantly, skill stacking and like adding and learning more and creating YouTube channels and learning how to optimize for YouTube. So I feel like, I definitely agree with, especially if you're a newer graduate or earlier in, even if you've been doing this for a while, the more skills you learn. I know you and I have, a background with some level of like the public speaking and improv, and even that kind of thing helps. Doing some of the marketing for that gets you some of those skills under your belt of, these volunteer opportunities. They may not be paid, but they're getting you clips and things to add to your resume. So it's important to continuously do that kind of thing. So I definitely agree with you there, and I think that's great advice for everyone listening. I hope you all take it, whether you're in marketing or otherwise. So, Mark, thank you.
One thing.
Oh, yes.
One thing I'd just like to kind of end on, at least for me, when it comes to life in general, I like experiences. And you want to be able to do things that you can look back on when it's cold and rainy here, as it is now in the late fall. And you can look back on some of the things that you've done previously, whether it was the vacations you took the year before, or even preparing for this podcast really brought back a lot of different emotions, looking through all the applications that I sent in that went nowhere, or the different projects that I made with the teams. And some of the memories, I've got a friend that says, choose the better story. And I think working in baseball has given me some incredible stories that are not just fun to tell, but also are good to look back on. I got in the mascot outfit during the 4th of July game in Florida, which when it comes to 4th of July in baseball, that's always the biggest night of the year. It was a sold-out crowd, 4,500 people. And I danced on top of the dugouts to Shout, the Animal House version, which is kind of my go-to song. And the place just went nuts. 4,500 people for me in a blue shag carpet dancing to this. I remember in 2015 when I was directing, we were doing the All-Star game, the home run derby, and the intense pride I had for not what I did, but for my camera operators and the fantastic job they were doing. They were out shooting the professional cable company who was there to also record the game. And following that broadcast, I was so proud of them, and I still remember that pride. Or in Pennsylvania, when I put together all the opening day festivities for their 10th anniversary opening day, just kind of looking around and be like, I did this. I came up with this and I orchestrated it. Those are things that I can look back on for my entire life if I need a little bit of a pick-me-up and be like, I did that. And so I would just encourage everyone, whatever it may be, whether it's taking a trip or working a particular job or whatever, choose the better story and make those memories for yourself that you can look back on, live it in the moment, and then have it for the rest of your life.
I think that is such a badass outlook to have. I love it. I love it. You know, for me, the advice that I always gave my brother and sister was, whenever given the choice to wonder or wander, always choose wander. And it seems like a similar thing, like don't wonder what could have happened. Get out there, wander out, and try it. And I agree. I think the majority of things that I have done in my life, similar to you, majority of things I've done in my life, the risks that I've taken, it's so on, these cold days we're about to undergo another 6 months of here in the Midwest. I can look back and think of like, oh yeah, I remember that time I got up and danced. Got up on the stage and danced with the band on my birthday, or got up on stage and did that thing, or it's such a empowering way to live life, and even your career, like to look at it that way. Choose the experiences. Again, if you're able to, if you are in a position, even if you have family and you have some of the things that might make it harder, I think still maybe finding those opportunities where you're not wondering, but maybe getting to wander in a slightly more incremental, maybe it is being a game day employee, just to get that, that hit of experience and be that, baseball employee for a day. So thank you so much, Mark. This was so helpful and informative, and I got so much out of this. I mean, I know you pretty well, and every time I talk to you, it's peeling back the onion layers even more. So,
well, thanks for the opportunity, Erin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I hope everyone listening got a lot out of this too. I think, especially right now, there's just probably a lot of people, I would imagine, kind of wondering, like, okay, well, when things get back to normal, what am I going to do? And so I hope, it is my strong hope, that people listen to this episode more than once and take notes and kind of act on things and choose to do the experiences and, take more risks, have more fun, and live more life. So whatever that looks like for everyone. So it's time to wrap up, Mark. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Absolutely.